So yesterday, Sayadaw explained that by reframing 3 kinds of misconduct, there will be 3 kinds of sucharita, 3 kinds of good conduct. The sucharita, the misconduct or evil conduct, are the kind of transgression, cruelty that can make the person morally degraded. So by committing these transgressions, one will be hurting others. So these transgressions and misconduct should be refrained. So if one is unmindful, one will fail to refrain from these things which should be refrained. And if one fails to refrain from these misconduct, if one does not control himself, herself, then one will be repeatedly committing these transgressions without any control. So letting oneself do freely, letting oneself commit these transgressions freely without any control, then there will be a lot of cruelty and there will be a lot of bad things. So letting oneself free on these transgressions and misconduct, it is called Paṇḍitā, and it is the most gross form of Paṇḍitā, most gross form of negligence and failure. So if one fails to refrain from things that should be refrained, then one is said to be failing one's responsibility as a human being. So both himself, herself, and also other people will get hurt. So one should not be failing, one should not be negligent to refrain from things that should be refrained. So if one is mindful, then one will not fail to refrain. So there will be Apamada. One will have mindfulness. One will have continuous mindfulness all the time, continuously. It is called Apamada, having sati, mindfulness at all times. So it is very good to have mindfulness at all times. If one free oneself to do misconduct, if one indulges in dosa, he, she will be mad or crazy with dosa. And there will be grudge. And if one indulges in lobha, greed, then one will be mad or crazy with greed. And if one does not know the fault of the defilements, lobha, dosa, and if one thinks of these lobha, dosa as good, then there will be madness or there will be craziness with delusion. And having this wrong view that good deeds do not bring good results and bad deeds do not bring bad results. So having this wrong view, one is mad or crazy with wrong view, ditthi. So if one is in this kind of situation, one cannot be free from internal enemy, internal enmity, vaira. So if one cannot be free from internal enemy, then one will meet fearful danger. So whenever one thinks about one wrongdoing, there will be fear, there will be self-criticism, and the wise people will blame or criticize this person. There will be physical suffering and mental distress as a result of one's own wrongdoing. And also, because of one's bad volition, one will be reborn in bad existences. So one will have these consequences, bad consequences, both in this very life and also in the future life as well. So if one cannot be free from internal enmity, then one will have also external danger. So these external dangers will arise if one cannot overcome the internal enemy. So such kind of person, she will be losing sleep, and also she will be losing appetite as well as sleep. So she will have bad circulation in the body. The blood circulation, air circulation will not be good, and all the bad stuff in the body will arise. So this person, meeting all these bad situations, they will resolve in drinking or taking intoxicants. So when she resolves in drinking or taking intoxicants, then the person will become mad or crazy with intoxication. And when his or her body has bad circulation, blood circulation and so on, and when she has bile disorder or blood disorder, then she will also become mad or crazy with disorder, organ disorder. So there will be all kinds of madnesses. If one free oneself, if one free one's mind onto bad things, and one likes to be free, of course there is freedom, but one will also be committing misconduct if there is too much freedom without any control. So if one is transgressing, then his or her body and speech will not be pure, it will not be clean, it will be rude and gross. And there will be suffering both in the mind and the body. So his or her life will be ruined. And also his or her life will end up in grief and sorrow. So there will be another kind of madness, yasanomataka. It is madness or being crazy due to loss. So one should cure these madnesses. One should prevent the madness from arising. So in order to dispel the madness, one should practice Satipatthana meditation in order to remove the madness. And by practicing Satipatthana meditation, one can also prevent the madness from arising. As one practices Satipatthana meditation, one can dispel the madnesses by developing Vipassana jnana, and if one knowledge becomes mature, and finally, when one attains the first Magga Phala jnana, the first stage of path and fruition knowledge, then he, she is sure that he, she will not be afflicted with madness anymore. So, if there is anger or hatred, there will be madness with dosa. And if one can overcome these madnesses with Magga Phala jnana, then the person can also overcome Ditthū Madaka. One will not have madness with wrong views once he, she has attained the first stage of path and fruition knowledge. So, when one attains the first stage of path and fruition knowledge, the moha or delusion is not totally eradicated, but the inferior kind of delusion that can lead to lower existences will be overcome when one attains the first path and fruition knowledge. So by practicing Satipatthana meditation, the training of Sila, Samadhi, Panya will develop, and based on these Sila, Samadhi, Panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom, one will gain joy in the practice. One will gain piti, joy, and there will be tranquility, passaddhi, there will be happiness, sukha. And because of the force or because of the momentum of this piti, passaddhi, and sukha, the blood circulation in the body will be generating well, and also the blood, the bile, will become pure, clean, so he, she can overcome this madness that can rise due to disorder. And also, by attaining the first path and fruition knowledge, one will not be mad with intoxication at all. So one can be totally free from this Suru Mataka. One will be totally free from madness with intoxication if he, she becomes a Sotapanna. And as a Sotapanna, one may still have grief and sorrow, but the kind of grief and sorrow is not so destructing anymore as a Sotapanna. But as a Sotapanna, he, she totally becomes free from madness with intoxication. And having mindfulness, one will be able to overcome the danger, the unseen kind of danger. So having mindfulness, one will not face the bad kind of danger, and one will not be possessed by spirit or demon if he, she is mindful. So if he, she is mindful, most of the possession by the spirits and demons cannot arise. So in this way, Satipatthana meditation is sure to cure the disease of madnesses. So Sayadaw declares that Satipatthana meditation has a guarantee to cure madnesses. So Buddha taught that sati, mindfulness, is essential in every way, in every place or everything. So Buddha said, Sate sa kwaha bhikkhave sabbatika varami. It means that everywhere, whatever one does, one needs sati, mindfulness. So this sati, mindfulness, is essential, it is needed in everywhere, in every kind of work. So one should be especially mindful so as to not let one's mind go free on the transgression. So one should be mindful so that one's mind will not go onto misconduct. So one should be very careful. One should not have sexual misconduct with other people who one is not married to, or who is not one's own partner. Even though one has one's own spouse or partner, the person should practice austerity in sensual pleasure. And one should be mindful in every kind of work. And one should have this mindfulness so that he/she can refrain from things that should be refrained. So having mindfulness, there will not be negligence or failure to refrain from things that should be refrained. So one should have sustained mindfulness, one should have persistent mindfulness. So this sustained mindfulness, persistent mindfulness, is needed in every kind of work. So this is taught by the Buddha. So one should practice this austerity in sensual pleasure, and one should have sustained mindfulness, especially when practicing meditation, in order to note every arising object. One should note with sustained mindfulness, with persistent effort. So having mindfulness, having control of oneself with mindfulness, he/she will not be inferior, and he/she will not be morally degraded, and he/she will have a victory if he/she has mindfulness. If there is lack of mindfulness, there will be negligence and failure, and one has to give up to kilesa defilement. So in order to have victory over the kilesa defilement, one needs to practice jhana, one needs to practice moral conduct, and also one should practice the three kinds of training, sila, samadhi, panya, so that one can overcome the kilesa enemy. So by practicing the three training, one will have victory over the internal enemy. So in order to repel the enemy, in order to drive out the internal enemy, kilesa defilement, one needs mindfulness. In order to repel, in order to drive out the kilesa defilement, so that one will have victory. So by gaining upper hand of the kilesa defilement, by having victory over the kilesa defilement, which has been following, which has been torturing internally, so by overcoming, by having victory over this nearest internal enemy, which are the defilements, then one will cure oneself from the madness. So throughout one's life, the madness has been torturing, and kilesa defilement has been torturing. If one can fight and repel these defilements, then one will have victory over these defilements, so which is very beneficial. So Buddha taught the method how to practice, and Buddha taught that one should learn the correct method of practice, and after learning the correct method of practice, one should practice according to the instruction and guidance. So by practicing accordingly to the guidance and instruction given, one will get a definite answer, and this is called Swakhata. So if one lacks mindfulness, there will be pamada, negligence, failure, heedlessness, forgetfulness. So one will fail to refrain from things that should be refrained. So failing to refrain from the misconduct and transgression, one will be losing. There will be a loss. So what one will lose is that one will be losing pure, clean behavior by body and speech. One will be losing the kind of blameless, pure, clean behavior by body and speech, and also the cultured behavior by body and speech will be lost, and also peacefulness will also be lost to those who fail or who is negligent to refrain from things that should be refrained. He, she will also be losing tame, gentle, lovable body and speech. So if one is not negligent, he, she will not be losing the body and speech, which are pure, clean, tame, gentle, and lovable. So one should be mindful so as not to free oneself on these 10 kinds of dukkha, 10 kinds of misconduct. Without any control, one will be doing these misconduct freely, and there will be a great loss. So if he, she does not fail to refrain from these misconduct and transgression, then his or her body and speech will become pure, clean, tame, gentle, and lovable. So without these transgressions, his or her life will become very peaceful, and he, she will be overcoming the internal enemy. By overcoming internal enemy, the person will not be facing 4 kinds of frightening danger. One will be satisfied with himself, herself. There will be piti, joy, and satisfaction. So just by observing morality alone, it is quite satisfying. So if one fails to refrain from this misconduct and transgression, one will not get these benefits, one will be losing these benefits. So by refraining from this misconduct, there will be benefits. So one should be repeatedly refrain from these misconduct. So if one can repeatedly refrain from misconduct, there will be great benefit. And if one fails to refrain from these misconduct repeatedly, there will be loss, and it is called Paṇḍitā. So if one fails, or if one is negligent to refrain from things that should be refrained, and if one fails to perform things that should be performed, then she is losing benefit, and it is called Paṇḍitā. And if one is mindful, if there is Apamāta, heedfulness, vigilance, and mindfulness, one will be getting profit and benefit. So one should refrain from the misconduct and transgression. One should not fail, one should not be negligent, or one should not be forgetful, one should not be heedless to refrain from things that should be refrained. One should not be negligent to refrain from these misconduct and transgression. So, to refrain from these misconduct and transgression, it is responsibility and duty of each and everyone. Failing, being negligent or heedless to refrain from these misconduct and transgression is called Paṇḍitā. So in food, there are food which is not suitable for people, and there are also poisonous food. So one should refrain, one should prevent these unsuitable or poisonous food. Failing to stay away from unsuitable or poisonous food, one will have great problem. So one should not be forgetful in order to stay away from this unsuitable or poisonous food. So in the same way, the misconduct should be refrained. And there are Paṇḍitā and Apamāta connecting with these Duccirita misconduct. Failing to refrain from these misconduct will be Paṇḍitā. Not failing, not negligent to refrain from these misconduct will be Apamāta. So this Paṇḍitā, failing or being negligent to refrain from this misconduct, will be just like taking food that is poisonous or that is dangerous. And being mindful to refrain from these misconduct will be like refraining from poisonous food. So in the food, there are unsuitable food, poisonous food, as well as suitable food. And among the suitable food as well, there are food which has less vitamins, and there are food that is full of vitamins and nutrition. So the kind of food that is full of vitamins and nutrition are most suitable for people. If one is negligent to eat suitable, nutritious food which has full of vitamins, if one fails to do so, then one will not get benefit. So one should also be mindful in order to eat suitable food that is nutritious, that is full of vitamins. So failing to refrain from misconduct there will be paṇḍitā, and one will suffer a great loss if there is paṇḍitā, failing to refrain from misconduct. And if one can refrain from this misconduct, there will be apaṇḍitā, and one will profit or one will benefit if he/she is able to refrain from misconduct. So the sucharita, good conduct, should be performed over and over again, repeatedly, so that this practice of sucharita will gain momentum. So one should have apaṇḍitā so as to perform this sucharita, this good conduct, over and over again. Failing to perform sucharita, good conduct, if one fails to do this, then one will not get any benefit. So one should not fail, one should not be negligent to perform things that should be performed. So if one can perform the sucharita, then there will be apaṇḍitā. So if one eats the food just to overcome the hunger, then it is not so beneficial. So one should eat the kind of food that has full of vitamins and nutrition. If one takes food that is full of vitamins and nutrition, then the person will have fresh, healthy, new materiality arising in the body. So in the same way, one should perform the good conduct that will make the person fresh, new in body and mind. So if one stay away from places in the world where there are contagious diseases, if one is able to stay away from these places, then one will not get afflicted by these diseases. And if one again and again repeatedly stay away from these places where there are contagious diseases, then one will not become afflicted with these diseases for long periods of time. So in the same way, if one lets one's mind free on the three kinds of sucharita, three kinds of misconduct by body, speech and mind, if one lets the mind free once, and if one fails to control it, and if one repeatedly lets the mind free on these misconducts, then there will be transgression, cruelty. So he/she is said to be failing, he/she is said to be a failure who is negligent and heedless. So one should not let the mind go free on these misconducts. One should have the wish or the welfare of others. One should have compassion and consideration towards others. Having this wish for the welfare of others and having consideration, one should refrain from these misconducts. So, being mindful with metta, wishing for the welfare of others, and compassion, he/she is said to be in apaṇḍitā. Today, Sayadaw explained about paṇḍitā and apaṇḍitā concerning with sila. So 1 hour is up. Sayadaw will continue to explain the next day.